is our body image discussion panel. I am Jen Harris. I am the programs director at the Kansas City Artists Coalition. I am joined tonight by Miss Cicely Jones, who is the exhibitions director. Cicely is in charge of curating, choosing and curating the exhibitions at the Kansas City Artists Coalition, which is how we were so fortunate to receive the opportunity to show Stephanie Alaniz's work. Stephanie is here tonight as a representative of the show Cozy, which features their fat quilts. And this centers around body image, around culture, and the experience that we may or may not be having and our varied experiences. So this is a great opportunity to have some conversations, see what folks think and what their experiences are and how they're the same and how they differ. Speaking tonight, other than Stephanie, we have Hannah McBroom. Hello, Hannah. Thank you for being here. We have Benjamin Rosenthal. Hello, dear. And we have Tayana Nelson. Would you prefer to go by Tay or Tayana?
Either is totally fine.
Fantastic. All right, well, I'm grateful that you're all here tonight. I want to give a little bit more of an introduction to each of you, that way that people know who you are and what you're all about. So I'm going to read your bios. I know listening to my own, it feels like they're exhaustingly long, but bear with me. Here we go. Stephanie Alaniz, they, them, was born and raised in South Texas. They received their Bachelor of Fine Arts in 2016 from Texas A&M-Corpus Christi with an emphasis in printmaking. They went on to receive their Master of Fine Arts from Western Virginia University in 2019. Stephanie's current work focuses on normalizing insecurities, challenging anti-fat bias, discussing mental health issues, and the intersection of all these topics. Through printmaking, textiles, drawing, and sculpture, they are able to create work about these topics with the hope of inviting the viewer in to reflect on themselves and how these topics influence the world around us. They are currently on the board of the Radical Intersectional Print Guild and have been since its conception in 2020. They currently live in Emporia, Kansas, where they teach at Emporia State University, as well as teaching courses at the Lawrence Arts Center. So Stephanie, thank you for being here tonight. All right, next up, we have Tay Nelson. Tay is a boudoir photographer and educator under her Good Bodies brand. Tay is kicking ass and taking names. I'm in such awe of your business model and all of the work that you have done. Your Good Bodies mission is centered around celebrating every single body for its beauty. Tay, welcome. Thank you for being here tonight. Hannah McBroom. Hannah, hello, 1993, Starkville, Mississippi. Hannah is a painter who works with the figure in landscape. She graduated from Mississippi State University with a Bachelor in Fine Arts and from the University of Arkansas with a Master's in Fine Arts. She has attended residencies at the Vermont Studio Center. And how do you say this School of Art's name, Hannah?
Chautauqua.
Okay, thank you. Chautauqua School of Art. Her current studio practice emphasizes the use of color and composition to construct figures representative of the artist exploring an unfamiliar landscape. Her studio is in Dogtown, St. Louis. And last but not least, on this panel tonight, Mr. Benjamin Rosenthal holds an MFA in Art Studio from the University of California, Davis, and a BFA in Art, Electronic Time-Based Media from Carnegie Mellon University. His work has been exhibited internationally in such venues and festivals as, I knew, I read through this and then I forgot. Damn it, Ben. Stuttgarter Film, say it for me.
Stuttgarter Film Winter.
Thank you. Cairo Video Festival in Cairo, Egypt. The Somtan Festival in Romania. The File Electronic Language International Festival in São Paulo, Brazil. And there are a few others whose names I will not destroy. Benjamin has been around this world. His work across medias explores what he theorizes as queer technosexuality and challenges the supremacy of physical contact in a technoculture age. Rosenthal is an associate professor of expanded media in the Department of Visual Art at the University of Kansas, where he has been since 2012. And he teaches video art, performance art, experimental animation, graduate seminar, and interdisciplinary practices. Y'all, it's a full lineup tonight. Everybody's got their own education, their own incredible brands, making, shaking, doing all the things. Thank you all for being here tonight to witness this. Cicely, Do you have anything you want to jump in and add before we just start asking these questions, or do you want to start with our first question? How do you feel?
Yes, I would like to jump in and add just a little bit about the exhibitions here. If you guys have seen them, or if you haven't seen them yet, you should get around to doing it before they leave at the end of May. These exhibitions this month are very important because they focus on our identity and also our body. I feel like that's a very important conversation when we talk about how we feel and how we associate with the world around us. Our place in the world deals a lot with how we feel in our bodies. So I'm really interested to have this conversation, and you'll see it in person when you guys come and visit the work. Stephanie's amazing quilts just like mesmerize you right with their size, and also the same thing with Thayer Bray's work. It does the same thing with masculinity as well. So I'm really interested for you guys to see the works in person, and interested to see you guys' responses.
Thank you. Now, if I can figure out how to reduce this spotlight, it'll be possible. Here we go. Thank you, Cicely. Thank you for everything. I know you've been working your ass off today, so I'm grateful that you're here tonight and for you sharing that. Let's get into it, shall we? Let's get into the nitty-gritty of this conversation with our esteemed panel. Folks, I would love, let's see. I'm going to start with Stephanie because your show is the one under exhibition, and then we'll go from there. Whoever would like to speak after, feel free to do so informally. If you'd like to raise your hand, you're welcome to. For our audience tonight, if you have any questions or commentary, please drop them over here in the chat, and Cicely and I will be keeping an eye on that and pose your questions to the panelists. So starting with Stephanie. Stephanie, can you explain to us, have you been affected by body dysmorphia based on cultural expectations? And if so, I would love for you to share an example of how that's occurred.
Yeah. So I'm a non-binary queer fat person. And so for me, being raised to perform as a woman was really confusing and hard. I always didn't feel that way. And I remember having a lot of things forced on me. And so like in the show specifically, I use for my quilt, I use Sunbonnet Sue or Holly Hobby. A lot of people use both interchangeably, but that was a quilt I grew up. It's like my earliest memory, having this like little girl quilt and being taught that that is what I'm supposed to behave like and fit all these categories. And I never quite felt like I fit all of those categories. And I remember even before knowing things, just feeling really uncomfortable and confused. And that informed my body also as like a fat child, but a fat child of like like parent. My mother was a fat person, and all of her family is as well. And my dad is a thin man. And growing up, they would often, sorry, that's my asthmatic cat. So he's fine. But anyway, so yeah, I can't hear you, Jen. Are you talking? Oh.
No, I was just delighted that, I mean, I hate that your cat is ill. And also I thought it was funny that a cat has asthma. So I just laughed inappropriately.
Oh, it's okay. Yeah, I hate that he's ill too, but it's okay. He's doing his best. But anyway, so I was really confused, and now my brother was fat too. And I remember like when I had an eating disorder and I was exercising and not eating much as a teenager, that I would make fun of him a lot, and that came from insecurity and just, you know, anti-fat bias, and of course being raised by both my parents who would like use their sizes against each other. My mom would call my dad an insult about his thinness, and he would insult her fatness, but usually it was like he started it, of course. And so anyway, for myself though, I always was confused why I didn't feel like a woman, and I was being told I was a woman. And I actually recently was diagnosed with PCOS, which I had learned has like roots in intersex, which I'm still exploring. But there's like all these different things, and having like facial hair and lots of acne, like not fitting in what feminine means, like, and obviously like when I'm saying that, I mean like the Eurocentric, like specific idea of like what beauty is in the eyes of like Western society. But then I went to college. I got to go to West Virginia, and that's where I met a lot of people who challenged how I feel. Yeah, I guess that's my long-winded answer. I'm sorry.
No, your answer was not long-winded at all, and thank you so much for sharing. I'm incredibly grateful for your honesty in this, so thank you. Who does anybody else want to speak to this question? Have you been affected by body dysmorphia based on cultural expectations? Hannah, I'm going to call on you. Go ahead.
I'm going to have to answer at some point. I am a trans woman from Mississippi, and I have ADD. So I'm like very much on like the neurodivergent scale. And so my idea and kind of association with like gender, as well as like kind of the outside world, is going to be different from like what the expected norm is. And so growing up in like a private school that was founded in the 70s, like super racist, like I was only really shown a very certain kind of body type and a certain type of way of being in the world. And it wasn't until I got to college that I got to experience other cultures, other people, really, other than like, you know, white, fleshy, boring, beige people. I got to actually see the world. And so as part of that, I started exploring my gender because I felt like I could do that, and quickly realized I was trans. And what that meant was basically I just didn't look at myself. And so for about 4 years, I didn't look in the mirror. I would shower, I would prepare, I would go about my day, but I just didn't look at myself, because looking at myself caused me a great deal of dysphoria, which came as like depression, anxiety, and it just made my life really hard. And so the easy solution was just not to look at myself until I was able to actually transition. And it wasn't until like 2 years in that I started looking at myself. And even then, I didn't like how I looked, because I didn't look like a cis woman, and I wasn't passing. And so for a lot of trans people, that is the case, because they don't have access to healthcare. They don't have access to kind of the procedures to actually be cis presenting and passable. And so I was actually able to do that procedure because I had insurance through Starbucks. Starbucks paid for $190,000 worth of medical procedures so I can look like this. And I actually went to the dentist's office for the first time in a while, and they thought I was in a car wreck. They did an x-ray of my face, and I have a bunch of like rebar going through my face to kind of keep everything held together. So I basically had a procedure to get rid of body dysmorphia, but it's still there because I still have those ideas in my head, and I haven't been able to kind of root them out by the roots. And until I do, I'm still going to be dealing with that kind of level of body dysmorphia that exerts itself as either an eating disorder or as a body image disorder. So.
Oh, thank you for your vulnerability and for sharing your truth in this. I appreciate your honesty. Tay, do you have an answer to this question? Have you been affected by body dysmorphia based on cultural expectations?
I would definitely say so. I grew up with a really young mom, and she was fat pretty much my entire childhood, and I grew up incredibly thin. And so I was like in this kind of mode where I saw my mom doing Jenny Craig and Weight Watchers, and if I started to gain any amount of weight, it was like pointed out to me because I was very thin, so it was very easy to tell when I gained anything, really. It was also, I think, just being in a space where my family is all from the South, so they I guess especially know a world where Black women aren't given as much grace as a lot of other folks are. And so there was a lot of pressure not only to fit in and make sure that I like didn't do X, Y, and Z as a Black woman who had family that were like school teachers and things like that. But I started like growing body hair, and it wasn't a thing that ever really bothered me, I guess. And it was something that was kind of like hammered home, and I got made fun of at school because of it. And it became like a thing where like I had to look put together and polished every day. And it's a thing that's really followed me into adulthood, where it's hard for me not to apologize to people, especially my family, when I walk into a room and I'm not that put together, polished person, because doing it for so many years before I was eventually kicked out of my house was really, really hard. And it was not something that's been my priority. And as an almost 32-year-old woman, I'm just now like starting to feel differently about it and starting to give myself grace and let myself do things, and like trying not to do things such as apologize for existing, apologizing for things like body hair, apologize that I, at the beginning of the pandemic, I had just had a surgery for a skin condition. I don't know if anybody knows what it is, but it's called hidradenitis suppurativa. And I had gotten a surgery at the end of like 2014, 2015, and I didn't know that it wasn't a permanent thing until I was literally about to be put under anesthesia. And they, like, one of the nurses said first time, and I was like, there are others. And so I had the surgery, and then a few years later, it came back with a vengeance, and it was like right at the beginning of the pandemic. And so I stopped being able to wear like underwear and like bras, and it's been really hard for me to be in public without a bra on and being like, you know what, this is like everybody else's problem and not mine. And it comes from also that place of being told that I had to be proper and prim and put together at all times. So I think that one of the biggest things is it's just been a lot of unlearning and trying to stay true to who I am and how I was raised, but at the same time realizing that there's a time and place for everything, and not everyone has to know that I have a skin disorder and that's why I don't wear a bra. Some people just kind of have to get over it.
God, the world is such a complicated and cruel place. And I appreciate your honesty in that too. As a big chested person, there isn't a going out in public without it being pointed out. People cannot help themselves, which I have never understood, because I've never thought to say anything, so I just appreciate you not only telling us this incredibly vulnerable story, but pointing out some of these very specific details. Everybody here so far has shared these really specific details of the way human beings just hone in and somehow point out these things or create insecurities with their attention and their focus. So thank you for your honesty, Tay. I really appreciate it. Ben, have you been affected by body dysmorphia based on cultural expectations?
I mean, I think I think certainly. I grew up as a fat kid, and but I think we all, in some way, shape, or form, grow up with a kind of dysmorphia about, because society dictates what is a valid body or what is a appropriate way of moving your body or speaking with your body, and that's where I think I found sort of the most dysmorphia in somebody who was deeply in the closet until I was almost 31. Performing society's ideas of masculinity sort of with my physical body and voice all became, I mean, it's extraordinarily taxing on a person to be hyper aware of a constant need to perform and convince yourself you're passing, right? Which was not happening necessarily, but this idea of I mean, children are cruel, to each other, and people are cruel, and also wondrous and joyous. But I think that there's a constant sort of societal idea of who we are from the moment we enter the room, and how we need to sort of conduct ourselves and operate our body. And I mean, I'm still terribly self-conscious about moving my body outside of spaces where I know I'm safe or powerful or empowered.
It's so interesting to me. how we can all have such vastly different lives and such similar stories. This is just, I think that's part of this conversation, right? Is destigmatization comes within these conversations of saying, like, if we are all experiencing it in one way or another, in one form or another, then we do ultimately have a responsibility to change the dialogue, the conversation, the experience that future generations, that even people around us are having. I think specifically, I know that that's happening likely with all of you in one way or another, whether it's in your work or your personal lives. But Tay, you so specifically work with many body types. And I think especially with boudoir photography, there's a particular market that it's directed at, and it's certainly not larger bodies. So I would love to know, not only how did you get into that niche market, or, but when we're talking about this like modification of body to fit into different places, like how do you bring a larger body into a boudoir photo shoot and make people feel comfortable and safe knowing that there's all these stigmas out there?
Yeah, sure. So I think that this is kind of like a multi-part thing, because there's no way that just me saying like, come on in, it's safe here, is going to work for people. So what I have found was, so specifically as to how I got into it was in about 2015, 2016, I had a friend who wanted me to try because she wanted to have photos taken for her husband. And so I was just like, sure. Like that's what boudoir was, especially in my mindset at that time. I did a lot of like the cute like heels and panties and like the red lipstick and like doing the pinup thing, and what people really think of today when they hear a boudoir is what I had started. And then while I was still working my day job and photographing, I found that I had started to really move into a place with my wedding brand where I wanted to specifically photograph queer folks, the community that I was in. My tagline for that is still for photographs that look like you, your neighbor, and your mom. And I've kind of brought that over to Good Bodies by first, I made sure that when I was setting everything up, I was photographing people in marginalized bodies at either a discounted rate or completely free for my portfolio, because people aren't going to come in and aren't going to feel comfortable in a space if you haven't already provided it for them. So I was very upfront saying like, I want to be able to showcase different body types. I want people to realize that you don't have to be a white cis het woman who is a size 2 in order to have beautiful photos taken of you. And we're not going to focus so much on props or the outfits or anything. It's going to be mostly about you and kind of what you choose to share in this space. So I think that a lot of it is me making sure that I am trying my best to show different body types in my work. I don't really make room in my studio or in any of my advertising to let people have like those kind of like doubt moments. I had, when I recently did a talk, someone asked me how I word basically avoiding taking photos of things that people don't like about themselves. And the answer is that I don't give people the chance to do that. That's not a conversation that I want to have with people. I don't put it in any of my like pre-questionnaire work. There's nothing like that. I don't want to start talking about that, because then that's all you're thinking about. And if I give someone the space to say, I don't like my stomach, then what they're going to be doing is the entire time thinking about it, not really being present with me in the moment. So that has been, I think, the biggest thing. But then also I've done a lot of kind of just like inner work. I went and worked with a photographer in Philadelphia named Cheyenne Gill, who is absolutely incredible and does a lot of work. She actually brought me up and she did like a BIPOC scholarship so that I could go there for free, because I wasn't really making a lot of money at that time. And I wanted to know how I could make things better. And so then by inserting myself also into the community and the conversation, I'm learning how to make everything that I can accessible. And it's not a job of being perfect. It's just realizing that sometimes you can do better and you want to do better, and you just have to figure out how. So the last couple thing is that, like, I have done that in trying to make sure that our studio, where one of the big things about why people come to me is that we provide lingerie so that you don't have to go shopping for it, because that can be intimidating, costly, and just kind of too much. So I have about 300 pieces in our studio currently, sizes extra small through 6X, which is, there's like a few lingerie spaces that do 6 to 10X, but it's really hard to put your like hands on. And then every piece of furniture in my studio is rated for up to 450 pounds, so that no one has to come in and be worried about breaking furniture or not fitting or not having a space, so that everyone's kind of on equal footing is how that's concerned. So I just kind of try to stop problems before they even start by like not giving people that option.
So you're modifying the environment rather than expecting people to come in with a modified body. You're giving them a space to truly be present in their own skin.
Exactly. And I think that, one other example I think that's great about that is, so like, especially in the photo world, you'll hear people say things like, I don't know how to photograph a fat body, or I don't know how to do posing for queer people, like when it comes to couples and stuff like that. But the thing that I have realized as someone who is, I don't like to claim the term disabled just because it's kind of, it's a me thing. But I have a body that doesn't work the way that I want it to all the time. And so I have realized that what's more important, especially in boudoir and posing, is I'm not posing for someone's size, I'm posing for their mobility. So there are people who can use their arms, there are people who can't. There's people who are ambulatory wheelchair users and are fine in certain situations and aren't in others. And I'm never going to pose someone differently based on what size they are, but I am going to do things that are going to be comfortable or more comfortable than you would think when it comes to exactly what you're doing.
This is a beautiful effort. Thank you for sharing all of those examples of how you're doing these modifications in your professional work. So I want to pose this question and see if it struck anybody in particular, that how do you modify your body to fit into different places? And I adjusted that in my conversation with Tay of how do you modify ultimately space or your work to accommodate body? So if anybody has an answer that they would like to offer, feel free to. Hannah, go ahead.
So I work at a brokerage firm. I'm one of the traders, and so I take care of a lot of clients who come in, and so I talk for 8 hours a day, and I try to keep this actual pitch here in my larynx, and so I'm operating at an M2 vocal cord. And there are times when I can't do that because my voice is dead, and so I'm having to constantly modify my voice. And so if it's going down and it's going into a deeper register, I have to go get some tea or something just so I can get that back up and going. And if it's not working, I just tell people the 70s are really hard on me. And that tends to throw them off, so they don't ask too many questions. But that's like one of the things I have to do is I have to modify my voice. And if I'm going into work, it's not too hard. But when I go home, I have to switch over into being like who I was before I started transitioning, because my family has not accepted that. And so I just kind of go into like this little slip mode and just kind of present as like a non-binary person until that trip is over. So those are like kind of the two ways I'm actively changing how I am in person.
I know that you're not alone in that experience, but thank you for sharing it so specifically. It is no small thing. And to consider the kind of challenges that you face with voice register, and also what people register as feminine, and how that's going to cater to their ideas of femininity in an environment where you're so specifically dealing with something as triggering, emotional and impactful as money. Like, I can't imagine how difficult that is.
Yeah, and one of the things I actually had to do was with my ex, we actually wrote a how-to guide to how to work with LGBT people as well as customers, because we were getting a lot of fraud inquiries from these older women who had either cancer or they had smoked, and the traders who were taking the calls, they were clocking them as dudes, and they're saying like, hey, this guy is calling in on this woman's account. It's like, this woman is clearly, who she claims to be. And you need to reassert how you're actually framing the person's voice, because not all women are going to sound the same. And some of them are going to have lower registers than others, and that's okay. So I had to do some changes there, and which turned out to actually work down the road, but we had to do some adjustments there.
It seems like it should be such a minute thing to have conversation about, but I'm thinking about so many instances of women I know whose register is deep from puberty on, whatever it is, and they're just accept, there's that strange thing. I'm like, I don't understand why we're having this conversation right now, but also I'm grateful we're having this conversation right now. I want to pose another question, unless Stephanie or Benjamin, you want to specifically speak to this answer. I don't want to stop anybody, but I also want to offer up these other questions we have. So do either of you have an answer specifically for how you modify your body in different places, personally or professionally? Or would you like me to offer the next question? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and pop over here then and put this one out there. The next question I want to ask is, how do you disrupt societal expectations of the body that are counter to your lived experience? So how do you disrupt societal expectations of the body? Does anybody want to start us off on that one? Benjamin, yes, please.
Well, I think in my work, I like to sort of redefine what we count as a body. Right, it doesn't have to be humanoid, it doesn't have to be flesh, it doesn't have to be match sort of recognizable pigmentation, right? I hope to I do this sometimes successfully, sometimes less successfully, but I think that we have this idea of what counts as a body that is extremely ableist, that is fatphobic, that is incredibly misogynist, like that. So I mean, anything that I can do to disrupt that, I think sort of helps counter my experience of what people's idea of what a body or me or somebody looks like. I think I'm sort of getting a little bit lost off track. I mean, personally, I think it took me a long time, but I sort of leaned into what it feels like to be very out and very visibly queer and or like as much of a fag as I can be in certain situations, as a way to create space for others. And so as an educator, like I sort of have this sort of now this following of sort of queer students and many trans students who feel safety because of that. And so I think like I don't think I actually teach a single straight white man, which I think is kind of wonderful at the University of Kansas to have a class that doesn't incorporate a single straight white man in the state of Kansas. But I think that I've leaned into doing that, and sometimes it's hard because you sort of catch yourself in the mirror, or but in doing so, I think it creates opportunities for others to enter, and that will change society. So
I love your answer, and I love it because I am engaged to someone who did not come out that long ago, right? And all of a sudden we have everything rainbow. I've been out for 20 years, so I have gotten very over my gayness. You know what I mean? Like I'm like, stop. Who cares? But for somebody who just had the opportunity to come out a few years ago, being able to be as visibly queer as possible, to try on all of the looks and energies, and to decide what femininity looks like for them, or it doesn't look like for them for the first time, is such an act of rebellion and an act of permission giving, of freedom, right? So for you to offer that to yourself, and then to create an environment where other people feel that kind of permission, that I think in one way or another we all need it to be handed to us by somebody else, right? Just that tender safety of be who you are, and maybe experiment with it while you're at it. Thank you for that. Thank you for that answer. It brings me great joy to know that you're being as visible as possible. Does anybody else want to answer this question?
I do. I'll let Stephanie go first.
Okay, and then go ahead, Stephanie, and then
No, you go first.
Cicely, go for it.
Okay. So me specifically, I grew up in a Black church, a Baptist church. And it was really, it was really hard to like kind of just be comfortable in my own skin. And so it wasn't, you know, okay to wear a dress or anything like that without a girdle, without a shape or anything like that. Everything had to be smooth and kind of, you know, nothing looked out of the ordinary. And so that mindset just kind of stayed with me as I got older, because I grew up in the church since I was little to the time I just didn't have to go anymore. And it just really influenced how I decided to dress myself when I got older. Going out, you know, maybe on the weekends with friends or anything, it just makes me think about how I'm showing my body and how people are looking at my body a lot. And I'm getting in the habit of kind of letting some of those things go. I let go of the girdle and the shaper, y'all. But sometimes it still feels a little, you know, a little weird to be so okay with, you know, just presenting me how I am. I feel like all of those kind of those requirements and all those things that I had to wear and had to do to make my body look a certain way, it really just ingrained a certain image in my head of myself. And so I feel like this kind of circles back to that body dysmorphia question, because I know now that I'm in this direction of showing myself how I am without any of that other stuff. But it seems like it's just weird getting into it now because I'm 24. Why didn't I do this like when I was 16, you know?
Thank you for that answer. I'm excited that you brought this up. We've talked about this a little bit, just the different beauty standards and expectations among our demographics, our age group, our generations, our races, our genders, our sexualities, like all of those things play into the experiences that we had. And when you talked about letting go of the girdle and that expectation, that's not something I ever faced. But when I shaved my head in the pandemic and stopped wearing makeup, there was definitely a backlash from a certain perspective of my community that was like, what are you doing? And I was like, we don't have to do this. Did you guys know I don't have to buy any of this shit? And it turns out that, you know, in a professional environment, you can be pressured into doing all of these things. In certain environments, you can be pressured, but there is such a freedom in knowing that it is an option, right? And I love that you brought that to the surface. So thank you, Cicely. Stephanie, do tell, how do you disrupt societal expectations of the body?
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot of thoughts, but I mean, the cheesiest and most cliche one is just all of us existing, like us not fitting that beauty standard that society has made, like just us existing and not forcing ourselves to do things we're uncomfortable with, like we've always been taught to. I think that's how I try to do it. It's not like easy. But I think just like having this conversation does that, making the work we're making, talking and doing the work we're doing and having these conversations, like all of those things do that. Yeah, and you know, for myself, I used to think I couldn't be non-binary because, you know, I still like appear very femme um and sometimes I want to perform femme, but also sometimes I don't. And I just sorry, I have to remember where I was going with this. um yeah, so there's a long time where I didn't give myself permission, and I would say I didn't give myself permission to be queer either, because for a long time I was in a hetero presenting relationship, and I thought like, well, your queerness can't exist in this space. And yeah, and I had a lot of really good conversations with a lot of people and read a lot of really good things and have challenged that mistake on my part, just thinking I couldn't be. And there's a ceramicist I really love who had made these cups that said femmes can be thems too, and that really stuck with me and like allowed me to say. And I had a lot of really great conversations with a few friends in Chicago, and I really felt like open and like comforted and loved and accepted, and that I could be non-binary, like, and I am non-binary is what I should say, and I'm allowed to like shout that, and it doesn't have to look or be or sound or do any of the things that everyone else thinks it needs to be. Like I can be femme or not femme and still be non-binary.
I think it's such an
Yeah.
interesting thing that you formed it as performing femininity. I think that's such a fantastic way to communicate this presentation. I think that speaks to something that Benjamin was saying also, right? There's a performative nature to the
Absolutely.
presentations that we offer, but no, it was never advised, at least to me, that this was all a performance, right? Like you would go to school. I don't know if you guys had, like, remember Spirit Week? And they would be like, dress up like the opposite gender. And it was so crazy, you know, and I just like, you wear your dad's Bud Light hat, whatever. But there is this element of like, of realizing that none of this is actually assigned, right? There are really no rules. They've all just been drafted by somebody else for somebody else to make money off of you. And that's, I think once we eliminate that kind of understanding that it must be mandatory, it changes the whole world, right?
Yeah. And so many of these things have been created by systems that are oppressive, like that are racist, that are misogynistic, that are all the homophobic, like all the things and all the intersections of all those things. Yeah.
I'm more than happy to throw out the things that aren't serving us anymore. The last question that we had for y'all tonight that I want to offer you the opportunity to speak up on. And also, if you have any questions, audience members, feel free to punch it over here in the chat and then we'll share it on your behalf. But the last question that came up tonight, as far as for our panelists, was from Stephanie's artist statement. It discussed radical kindness. So the question I want to pose to you is, what is radical kindness to you? Hannah, were you raising? Oh, fantastic. Tay, you had your hand raised. Go ahead.
I did, but it was about the last thing, so I don't want to distract us if we're
No,
moving.
go ahead. Go ahead. I would love to hear your thoughts. I just didn't see your hand raised, so thank you.
Oh, no, you're okay. So I was just gonna say that I would be remiss if I did not plug the fact that I don't know if anybody knows who Fat Girl Flow is. Carissa Enneking and I last year started a thing called Fat Camp. And we're having our second annual one this year. We know that the cost has made it inaccessible to some, which is unfortunate. But one of the reasons that it is more expensive this year is because we are putting more things into place so that we can let Black and Indigenous people of color come completely free or at like a large discount for 2024. So I think that's kind of one of the biggest things that I've ever done, especially it's hard as someone who does not love attention or who likes it in very specific ways for me to kind of put myself out there and do something like this. So the camp is designed specifically for fat folks to come and be able to be themselves. We have a Fat Babe pool party. We eat unapologetically. You get all your favorite snacks when you come in. Everything's catered. And you just kind of get to be yourself in a place where maybe you weren't able to before. And I always feel kind of weird about it just because, again, I was not fat until I went to college. And so it sometimes still feels kind of like I'm cosplaying and I'm like, oh, I also know that there's like tiers to being fat. And so it always just feels like it's not my space. But that's a thing that is on me and not on anybody else. And so it's a thing that we work through, right? So yeah, I just wanted to point that out just because I feel like it's one of the like boldest things that I've ever done, period, is to be a part of something like this where we're specifically making space for fat folks and being like, well, we really don't give a shit if it makes you mad about it. So there you go.
I think that's so beautiful. Listen, I've heard rave reviews about your original Fat Girl pool party, and I was invited this year, but I don't have the information yet. I was told that you were doing it again. That's what I'm saying, and I got so excited because I don't know if you've seen Shrill on Hulu.
That's where we got the idea. I love it.
I saw Adie Bryant from SNL had that show Shrill, and they had a Fat Girl pool party. And when I saw that, I cried because I've had so many lovers that are fat, and I've been every size a person can be, but I know what it's like to go to the pool and have to like just hunker down in this feeling of like, I don't give a shit what anybody else thinks. I'm just going to be here rather than I'm going to the pool. Like there's such a different energy that comes with that kind of experience. And I don't want to have to be old enough to be somebody's mom to be comfortable being fat, like why can't we just be in our own skin? So please share the links to that so that we can celebrate this with you and be there. And I want to open it up again. Thank you for that commentary, Tay. I really appreciate it. Let's talk about radical kindness. What does radical kindness look like to you as an individual, or to you as a creative, as a professional, to yourself? What is radical kindness? Feel free to start us off, whomever would like to answer first.
I can start us off.
Yes.
So radical kindness, I will share two views. Creatively, as an artist, I love to see anything that people kind of overlook in person. So I'm talking about like crow's feet near the eyes and extra wrinkles on the hands to show, age or anything like that. Doing portraiture has made me realize a lot of things that people don't pay attention to, even that's like right on their face. You'll see your face every single day, but you won't realize, just like a scar or a mole that someone sees every day. So I like that side of it. And it's radical kindness for me to see people, in those kind of spaces. But in person, it feels like, not to sound cliche, but radical kindness would definitely be seeing you guys disrupt these societal expectations. And in person too, like shaving that head, wearing that stomach out, just all that stuff. All of that is, to me, it's so inspiring, and it makes me want to do it for myself too. So that's why I love to see it in person and see someone else do it, because you guys never know who you're inspiring or who you're, just influencing to do those type of things. And I am always going to be that extra person, and to tell you that compliment from all the way 3 blocks down the street. If I see that stomach out, I'm saying, okay, stomach, I see you, girl. Like I am that extra person. So I really want people to take advantage of it and just be so, just go for it, in any type of aspect. If it's hairstyles, if it's outfits, if it's being as courageous as calling yourself a they, anything in that kind of realm, I am so here for it. And it inspires me to see more people do it.
That's a good word. One of the many reasons I love Cicely Jones, everybody. Thank you for that, though. It's just I think it's really wonderful to be holding space for, I receive you as you are. I love you as you are. I respect you as you are. And there is no explanation needed further, just mutual. Thank you for bringing that to light. It was really powerful and beautiful. Does anybody else want to share what their experiences of or with radical kindness? Everybody's like, nah, I'm cool. Do we have any questions? Hannah, go ahead.
I have one. So one of the things that has been really hard is finding trans representation. And it wasn't until I went to an art history lecture and they were going over Michelangelo's work. And they said, or at least they were showing Michelangelo's women who were all cis men with boobs on them and no penises. And so there was my representation way back in the day, in plain sight. And so something I have to remember about my own body is that I'm still hot as fuck, regardless of what size I am or how I look or what's happening, is that I'm in the art history records as being hot as hell, and everyone wanted a piece of that. So that's something I have to remind myself every day.
Oh, I love this confidence. And absolutely, right? That's it. You have to hold on to it. It can be externally validated, but it is internally manifested, and it must be maintained. You have to kindle that light, because the world is what it is. You know what it is. Thank you for that. Thank you for sharing the power of that. Benjamin, you have any insight on radical kindness you'd like to share? You're a radically kind person, so I just wondered if you had any thoughts on it.
I cannot add anything to that, Hannah.
Right?
So there's nothing I can say that would make that better.
Well, on that note then, Miss Cicely Jones, do you have anything you'd like to add before we wrap up tonight?
I would just like to add for us to keep on showing up in these places as our true selves, and for us to keep, knocking them upside the head with all this radical kindness that we have to share. And I want us to be so powerful in these spaces like this. And I want us to be able to have conversations like this more, because it does help what Stephanie said earlier, talking about it, seeing it in person, seeing it in creative practices. All of this helps us, just to keep doing this and, keep living how we are and how we should be living. And for you guys to come see the show, because it closes next Friday, the 26th.
Yes, thank you. Kansas City Artists Coalition is at 3200 Gillum in Kansas City, Missouri, 64109. It's Kansas City Artists with an S, coalition.org if you want to check us out on the internet. KC Artist Coalition on Instagram, because we couldn't get the whole thing in there without torturing everybody. But y'all, thank you so much for being a part of this panel tonight. Thank you to our attendees. We're so grateful for your time and energy and participation in this conversation. Cicely, thank you for curating this exhibition. And
there were the artist talk on Thursday. Sorry, didn't mean to cut you off.
You're totally fine. 21C at 6:30.
Yep, this Thursday at 21C at 6. I think it'll be on Instagram, guys.
6 to 7:30. That's right.
Yes.
All right, y'all. And